In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Republican candidate for District 9, Brent Taylor, tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian. Thanks for joining us. I am joined tonight by Brent Taylor. He's the Republican candidate for U.S. House District 9. Thanks for being here again.
Glad to be here, Eric, Bill.
Along with Bill Dries, reporter with the Daily Memphian. Before we get started with our conversation with Brent Taylor, I'll note that we're moving toward the federal elections. Early voting begins October 14th. The election day is November 3rd. We're working to do one-on-one interviews with all the candidates for key races in those races. We last week had Jerry Green, Democratic candidate for governor. We've reached out to Marsha Blackburn, the Republican candidate, and hope to get her on soon. We have Brent's opponent, Justin Pearson, the Democratic candidate for District 9, coming up soon. Chaz Mulder in District 5, and his opponent is scheduled. We hope to get his opponent, Charlie Hatcher, the Republican, on as well. And then we'll start working on District 8, I think the remaining one there that now covers parts of Memphis. But we are here with Brent Taylor. Thank you. Congratulations on your primary win. You've talked about your endorsement from Donald Trump, President Donald Trump. Are there any policies when you look at his first term in office and his current coming up on a year and a half that you disagree with?
Well, one is, and it's not necessarily a disagreement, but I would like to see the war in Iran, I would like to see him get that to completion. And I know that's been going on now for a couple of months. And we have the capacity to end that and do it in a way it's not a repeat of Iraq where we have to go and set up a government. I think we have to take those folks out over there and tell the Iranian people, look, when you put in a government that is willing to be a good neighbor in a bad neighborhood and you're willing to work with peace-loving folks around the world, then we will support you. But if you don't, we'll be back. And the president, I would like to see him end that sooner rather than later. Have the costs so far in ending it, I assume you mean a military end, the billions of dollars spent, the billions in damage to bases around the Middle East, the 100+ service members and U.S. service members who died, to go farther military would mean more costs, more death of U.S. service members, presumably, certainly the risk of it. And costs are up, oil is up, it affects fertilizer, it affects all kinds. I mean, are those costs worth it for a country whose nuclear program has been, to some degree or another, harmed quite a bit? Well, it needs the nuclear program. We should end the war when the nuclear program is completely at any cost. At any cost, because we cannot allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. We see what they would do with conventional weapons. You can only imagine them holding the world hostage with a nuclear weapon. And so whatever the cost is to ensure that they don't have a nuclear weapon will be far less than if they have a nuclear weapon and, God forbid, were ever use it. Do you see, critics of the president will say there's not a consistency. Even this week he was talking somewhat glowingly about Kim Jong-un, the president of North Korea, which has 60 nuclear missiles, has ballistic missiles that could reach the United States. He was, President Trump was deriding South Korea, which has been a longtime ally. Is that consistent with what you're saying about the threat of Iran? It is, because you see how the president has to treat North Korea differently than we have been able to treat Iran. And if Iran were to get a nuclear weapon, suddenly we have to treat them much more differently and probably in a way that much more similar to the way he's treating North Korea. We just cannot allow these rogue nations to become nuclear powers because they will begin to hold the world hostage, and we can't allow that. Let's bring it, Bill.
Should President Trump have gone to Congress, or should he go to Congress to invoke the War Powers Act?
Well, he may be operating under War Powers Acts that were previously authorized. But again, he's as the commander-in-chief, he has the responsibility to keep Americans safe, and there is no better way to keep America safe than to ensure that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon.
Congress also has oversight power when it comes to that. Should Congress use it?
Well, look, anytime Congress has an oversight power over the administration, whether it is this or whether it's regulatory matters, Congress should have oversight over the administration. One of the things I've learned, Bill, in this whole process of running for Congress is a common thread I have found through all this is that Congress doesn't act anymore legislatively. They allow what should be done with legislation is now being done by rulemaking in the administrative branch, the administration. And what happens is you've got businesses and others who have this whiplash from one administration to the next based on how the rules are interpreted. And I fear what's going to happen is that we're going to lose. America's always had an edge when it comes to innovation. And I'm afraid we're going to lose that innovative edge because people who would invest in innovation will no longer do so because to invest billions of dollars only to have the rule interpreted a different way with the incoming administration is a way that they don't want to spend their money. And it may allow other countries then to become innovators that we've always occupied that space. So that is something that Congress should always do is to ensure that they have oversight over the administration, but also they need to get back to legislating and not delegate the authority to do what they should be doing legislatively, do it in rulemaking. We've done that in Tennessee. We have a government operations committee, an oversight committee, and we exercise oversight over the administration, and there is consistency to ensure that rules are interpreted the same regardless of the administration.
One of the criticism from Democrats has been that with Republican majorities in Congress, the House, and the Senate, that Republicans have largely been absent from serving as a check and balance in its relationship with the Republican president. Is that accurate?
That's not a serious question, I hope.
It is.
Because if you look at the Biden administration, there was no one that was holding the Biden administration accountable during those Biden years. Look at Democratic presidents. The Democrat majorities, when they've had Democrat president with Democrat majorities, they never provide that oversight. I think Republicans are much more likely to do so than Democrats.
Do you think they have done so far, 2 years into this administration?
Republicans?
Yes.
Yeah, if you look at the first Trump term, one reason there was not a lot of oversight is because the Democrats had control of the House and they were able to impeach the president. And that's the fear. That's why it's so critically important that this seat in Tennessee flip to Republican, and we can get other seats around the country to flip to Republican, because if the Democrats get control of Congress, they will impeach the president. And for the next 2 years, he will be fighting impeachment and will not be implementing the America First agenda that Americans sent President Trump back into office to implement. And that's why it's important that we win this election.
One other impact of the war that has frustrated some of his supporters, because you mentioned the America First agenda, has been, the rising costs at home. And so, that plus the tariffs, interest rates are up, inflation has been up since COVID, and so that I'm not saying that started when he was elected. When you're, the district, we'll bring up a district map here in a second, that it stretches from Shelby County to just, south of Nashville through a lot of rural areas, urban areas, suburban areas. Is there an affordability crisis? Is there an affordability problem that you hear from your potential constituents?
Yeah, so look, I during the campaign, I talked to the voters of District 9, and I affectionately refer to them as Tennessee Niners. The Tennessee Niners have told me that, yes, they feel the pressure of higher prices when they go to the grocery store, when they go to the gas pumps. But there are a lot of contributing factors to that. Number one, inflation was high from the Biden years. But to me, one of the largest contributors to the higher prices, and the reason wages have not been able to catch up with the higher prices, is because of this mass migration. And a lot of it has to do with illegal immigration. And the president has made that a central theme of his first term and the second term. But when you have millions upon millions of people who are in the country illegally, They depress wages because they have to have jobs. They depress wages. They have to have a place to live. They're increasing housing costs. And when you go to the hospital or you go to the grocery store or you go anywhere, particularly the hospital, if you go to the hospital and it takes 3 hours to be seen by a doctor, it's because they are taxed because there are people here illegally who are in those hospitals and clinics. And when they go to the grocery store, they're consuming, they're buying groceries that were intended, that drives up the cost because we have more people trying to buy those groceries and even energy cost. So if we want to lower costs for Tennessee Niners and people across the country, we have to deal with this mass migration. The illegal immigrants need to go back to where they came from. And I will go further. We need to have a pause on legal immigration to allow those that are here legally time to assimilate and become Americans. And when we do reopen immigration, it needs to match the workforce shortages that we have and not just allow anybody to come in.
Will naturalized Americans, legal Americans, do the jobs that many of the immigrants do? I mean, a lot of business owners say they won't. I mean, in the food processing and agricultural and in construction, that the fear for a lot of business owners, separate from the politics of it, is simply that they won't have the labor. They're going to have to pay people more. So that's only going to feed, or arguably it was already feeding, inflation and rising costs. I mean, isn't that a risk with getting rid of people who, for the most part, I mean, overwhelmingly, are working and paying taxes?
Well, that was the same argument in the 1850s when they were dealing with slavery. Like, who's going to do the work if we end slavery? That worked out for the better for everyone. And I believe we don't know whether Americans will take those jobs or not because they're being undercut by the illegal immigrants that are here that are taking those jobs.
Has there been overreach, before I go back to Bill, has there been overreach on the part of ICE and Homeland Security in terms of roundups? I mean, the most famous would be, or the most prominent would be, the shooting of 2 protesters up in Minneapolis. There have been people who have green cards who've been taken to deportation centers. Has the whole effort that you support, has it had moments where it went too far?
Well, if you think it wouldn't have to go too far, to use your term, if local law enforcement would just simply cooperate with the federal immigration authorities. The reason those shootings happened up in Minnesota was because the illegal aliens, when they're arrested on other charges, they're let right back out rather than having ICE come to the jail facility where they can take the person into custody safely. The local law enforcement was releasing them right back out into the community, so ICE has to then go track them down in a public setting, and that's where you increase the danger. That's why I sponsored legislation here in Tennessee that requires local law enforcement that when they have an illegal immigrant in custody from committing another crime, that they have to notify ICE, number one. Number two, they have to hold the illegal immigrant for a total of 48 hours, which is the maximum amount of time in the immigration detainer, to give ICE ample time to get there and get the immigrant picked up.
But does there need to be more oversight? I mean, do there need to be investigations of the Homeland Security ICE folks who shot on camera the protesters in Minneapolis? I mean, there hasn't been much investigation. Other situations where people who are here legally with green cards who've been taken to deportation centers. Does there need to be more, back to oversight, more oversight of the effort to get illegal immigrants, from your point of view, out of the country?
No, I do. There have been investigations, and anytime there are shootings, whether if law enforcement involved shootings or not, those are investigated, okay. And if charges are warranted, charges will be brought. But again, look, all of this, it looks messy, but if we were talking about people who committed murder and the police are arresting those people and you had cameras and out on the street, we wouldn't have the same concern about that. But again, these illegal immigrants are in the country illegally. It's against the law. And sometimes law enforcement is messy business.
About halfway through the show, I'll remind everyone, if you joined us late, we have Brent Taylor's opponent, Democrat Justin Pearson, coming on the show soon. We recently had other candidates on. All those will be available at WKNO.org as we move through all the key races that we can get to before Election Day, November 3rd. But I'll go back to Bill.
Senator, the mayor of Memphis, Paul Young, says this city does not have an immigration problem. That, in fact, the immigrant population here contributes to the city's growth and the city's economy. What do you say about that?
I would disagree with the mayor, and I have a lot of respect for Mayor Young. I saw him last night. I would disagree. Again, if somebody is here illegally, they are depressing wages because they are taking a job from an American and doing it for less money. So Americans' wages can't catch up with the inflation that we have seen. And they have to live somewhere, so they're competing for housing, which drives up housing costs. When they go to the store and purchase products, they're purchasing products, creating a greater demand, which increases the price for everything. I believe we do have an immigration problem. And again, I think more importantly, whether it's Memphis or any great American city, when you have people who come here who do not believe that they are Americans, they are here to take advantage of America, but they don't want to become Americans, I think that is a danger because it changes the culture of our Western values. They don't understand self-governance, and that's why I think we need a pause on all immigration until we can give those that are here legally time to assimilate. And this is not unheard of. We did the same thing in the early 1900s with the Irish and Italian immigrants that came in. They came in great numbers, and they paused immigration that lasted up until about the 1950s to give the Irish and Italians time to assimilate into America. And they are now part of the fabric of America. We have more foreign-born nationals today than we've ever had in our country's history. America needs some me time to give those folks time to assimilate and become Americans so we can protect our American culture.
If the people you're talking about are citizens, should they have to undergo some kind of check on that status, or is that status in danger going forward?
Well, if they're here legally, then there's no check necessary. They're here legally.
But the president wants to end birthright citizenship.
Well, I agree with him. We should end birthright citizenship because no other country in the civilized world does what we do. Just because you were born here, you become a citizen. We're the only country that does that. And it causes a lot of problems, birth tourism, anchor immigration, and it causes a lot of problems. And I think we ought to end it. Either the president thinks he can do it through executive action. I think the Supreme Court has disagreed with that. But I would support even a constitutional amendment to end that if we need to finally put a stop to birthright citizenship.
So what would happen then with people who are citizens now who were born here of parents who were not citizens at the time, possibly here on a work permit?
Well, I mean, that'll be up for the courts to decide that under our current immigration scheme. But if we were to change the Constitution, which it appears the Supreme Court has said if you want to end birthright citizenship, it needs to be through a constitutional amendment. Those are the types of things that would go into how that amendment would be written to try to account for those that were born here when their parents were here on work visas. But look, we have to do something. We cannot continue what we're doing. We're going to lose our nation if we don't do something about this immigration. I mean, we can't allow all of South and Central America to just flood our borders and come here. We can't afford that, and it harms Americans and it harms Tennesseans, and that's why I support the president's effort on immigration.
We also have other immigration agencies that deal specifically with the border. Should that be focused on the border? Because it sounds to me like all of our problems, by your view, can be traced back to immigration, legal or illegal. Is that accurate?
It's largely accurate, and I will tell you, it's not just the border. More people come into the country that are illegal aliens who come in legally. They overstay their visas and won't go home. That's why I sponsor legislation in the state Senate that allows legal immigrants to get a driver's license, but the term of that license, where you and I have about a 5-year term on a license, their term has to match their visa, because we need to make it difficult for them to be able to function in America, function in Tennessee when their visa expires, to try to force them to go back to their home country. And if they want to come be Americans, look, all of us, we want to support people who want to come here legally and become Americans, but a lot of these people aren't interested in being Americans. They're interested in taking advantage of America, and that's what we have to put aside.
But it doesn't sound like we want people to come here legally when we talk about, but we might pass a law a couple of years down the road that hauls you in to court to see if we still want to keep you.
Well, if they're here illegally, I hope they haul them into court and they find out whether or not they're here illegally. And if they're not, they need to go back. I mean, look, the immigration issue is harming Americans. And the other side wants to act as if we're doing how compassionate we are and empathetic by letting all these people come to our nation. We won't be a nation if we continue to allow all these people to come into our country. We have to be sensible about our immigration, and we have tens of millions of people in this country who probably shouldn't be here, and it's harming America, and it's going to damage our culture, our Western way of life. Look at what's happened over in some of the European countries. Look at what happened in Great Britain. They've allowed immigration just to overrun them, and we don't need that here.
But your side of the discussion seems to blame every problem we have on immigrants who are here legally or illegally. Increasingly, your side of the discussion is not making a distinction between legal and illegal.
Then I don't think you listened to what I said earlier, Bill. I said we need to stop illegal immigration. Those that are here illegally need to go back. We need a pause on our legal immigration system to give those that are here legally. Did you hear that part earlier?
And
that they were here legally. That they were here legally, and to give them time.
Citizenship.
To give them time to assimilate, to become Americans. When I saw Vice President Vance make a comment the other day and said that there was an American citizen who somebody was here legally, was now a naturalized American citizen, was chastising the Trump administration for ending foreign aid back to that person's home country. And they said, my country needs that aid and you shouldn't stop it. This guy was an American citizen, but he didn't view himself as an American citizen. He still viewed himself as a citizen of the country from which he came and wanted America to keep sending money there.
And we have to have laws to punish someone who says that? Is that your point?
No, he's welcome to say whatever he wants to. What I'm saying is that just because people come here even legally and become legal citizens, that they still don't view themselves as Americans. That's why we need a pause on immigration, legal immigration, to give the people who are here legally an opportunity and time to assimilate. America needs some me time.
We got 3 minutes left here. Let me run through some other issues. Obviously, immigration and immigration crackdown has been a priority of the Trump administration. Another big priority, though, has been sort of rebuilding a ballroom, possibly building a big arc. Do you support that sort of spending, which looks to be in the billions of dollars on monuments and renaming of, potentially the Kennedy Center with Trump's name? Do you support those priorities?
Well, it's my understanding the ballroom is being built with private funds.
They're asking money from Congress. Would you vote to fund that?
Well, again, until you just said that, I assumed it was being built with private funds. So
they need to go to Congress to fill in the gap.
Well, we'll look at that when legislation is presented. But initially, the ballroom is going to be built with private funds, and we'll see.
To fill out a bunch of the stuff, they're looking for public money. Another big priority of a lot of the supporters of President Trump was releasing all the Epstein files, and he promised to do so. There's millions of documents of the Epstein files that have not been released. Would you vote to release those documents?
I would vote to release them, but I will also say I just saw a congressional hearing the other day that there were millions of documents that were released, all of which were in the scope of Congress's order, and that there were none that had not been released pursuant to Congress's order. But I would have no problem voting to release the Epstein files.
We talked about law enforcement. You've obviously been very pro law enforcement in your career in the state Senate and locally. Should all of the January 6th rioters been pardoned, including those who assaulted police officers at the Capitol? Should they have been pardoned by President Trump?
Well, the reason they were pardoned, Eric, is because they didn't receive due process. They were put in jail and did not receive due process, and that's why they were pardoned. But as it relates to law enforcement, I will hope when you have my opponent on here that you will ask him about getting up off the House floor, going up into the gallery where state troopers were attempting to arrest his brother for violating House rules and creating a ruckus in the gallery. he went up there and stood nose to nose with law enforcement and called him an MF boy. I hope you'll ask him about that, because you're right. I have supported law enforcement, and my opponent has not, and that will be a key deciding factor in this election.
One more. We have 30 seconds here. One more question that's a weird one, but that comes up is: did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election?
The 2020 election was in 2020. He was elected president this last term, and he has 2 more years left in his term as president. I'm going to support him, and that's why we need to keep the House.
Did he win in 2020?
Look, I think there were irregularities, particularly in those states like Arizona. And if you look where there were issues, where they have those hand-marked paper ballots in Pennsylvania and Arizona, where the Democrats
he maybe didn't win, from your point of view. Or maybe Joe Biden maybe did not win.
Yeah, I think if you look, where those 80 million votes that Joe Biden, we have never had that kind of turnout, and I think it's shady.
Give me your 30-second pitch on why you should represent the 9th District.
Well, I think the reason I'm the best candidate to represent District 9 is because I have got really the right skill set to go to Washington to really make Memphis matter in Washington, just like I've done in the state Senate. I've got business experience. Look, I took out a home equity loan back in 2004, a $60,000 loan, and I started my business. I grew my business, and I sold it to private equity about 5 years ago. The reason, Eric, Bill, that's important is I know what it's like to be a small business owner. I know what it's like to lay awake at night wondering, do I have enough money in my payroll account to make payroll the next day? My wife reminds me the most insulting check I ever wrote myself was a $10 payroll check, because that was all I could afford after I paid my employees. The other skill set that I have that's important is I've served at every level of government. I've served on the city council, I've served on the county commission, was chairman of the election commission, and now in the state senate. And I think that skill set will serve me well to represent Memphis and Washington to do what we've always wanted, and that is to make Memphis matter.
You've talked about how President Donald Trump endorsed you. It's a big, on social media and on your website. There are a lot of, you mentioned small businesses. There are a lot of small businesses that are feeling the pressure of high interest rates. You talked about loans, of high oil and chemical costs because of the war in Iran, and just the general affordability, inflation that's been up since the Biden administration and through the Trump administration. Do you feel like Donald Trump is being a good steward of the economy?
Yes, but there are challenges. I mean, obviously the war in Iran, but that was a necessary war because we cannot allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. And president after president after president talked about doing something about it, but never did, and President Trump is actually doing something about it. But look, on the affordability issue, the way he has tackled this mass migration, mass immigration, that is a large contributor to the cost of living being elevated, because when you have this mass migration, illegal immigrants and others coming here that they're depressing wages. That's why our wages can't keep up with the cost of living and with inflation, because we have so many immigrants here that are competing for those jobs and depressing wages. They have to live somewhere. They're increasing housing costs and just other consumables, everything from gasoline to electric rates to everything else. When there's more demand, the price goes up. That's why we have to get these illegal immigrants deported, and we need a pause on immigration to allow for America to have some me time and get our prices down.
All right, let me bring in Bill Dries from the Daily Memphian.
Whichever party gets the most seats, it looks like the House, whether it's a Republican majority or a Democratic majority, is still going to be pretty close, still pretty much within a few votes of each other. If that is indeed the case in the general election, it's kind of a change for you coming from the state Senate where Republicans have a supermajority. How do you handle that?
Well, Bill, you've followed my career since 1995, the late 1900s, when I was on the city council, when I was in a double minority. I was the council was majority black and I was white, still white, it was majority Democrat and I was a Republican, and so much of my political teeth was cut being in a minority. And I was effective on the city council in the minority. I was effective on the county commission in the minority. It wasn't until I arrived in the state Senate where I was in the majority. And I will tell you, having done both, the majority is a lot nicer to be in. But if I am, in fact, in the minority in the U.S. House, that is terrain that I'm used to operating in.
Given the national political environment, which I think we've seen a fair reflection of in all three of these congressional races, is compromise possible? Is compromise desirable?
Well, I think that question is really asked of the other side because the Republicans have demonstrated common sense. The other side demonstrates communism. We've talked about competence on our side. They like to talk about chaos. So it's a matter of whether or not the other side is willing to work with Republicans. And if they're in the majority come January, they will have to lead, and that is much more difficult.
We are out of time. Thank you, Brent Taylor, for being here. Thank you, Bill. If you missed any of the show, you can get the full episode online at WKNO.org. The Daily Memphian or YouTube. We'll have Justin Pearson, Brent Taylor's opponent, on coming up soon. And that is all the time we have this week. Join us again next week.